marketplace. Okay, we're at 1 minute after the hour, so without further ado, here's Al Lewis.
Okay, thank you, Mark. And Marshall's going to put the slides up, and he will be sort of controlling the stuff. So, Marshall, you can actually hit the screen share button there. And while you're doing that, I will introduce Marshall for those of you who don't know him. He is, I call, an uber journalist. He is probably, there should be many more people doing this given the amount of corruption in healthcare. You can go to the next slide. This is our dog and pony show, as you can tell. And the next slide is the intro. He is quite literal, I believe, about the only person of his kind right now, given all the corruption in the healthcare field. One would expect more people to be focused on it, but he's the guy, basically. He's been doing this for a decade at ProPublica. You've probably seen his stuff. He also does educating, as you can see, at the Graduate School of Journalism at CUNY, and he also, we're going to give him a couple minutes at the end to do a shameless plug, has founded his own academy. So this is a multi-way conversation, as Mark mentioned, so feel free to jump in at any time. We're going to have questions that we're going to be asking the audience, and if you get it right, we'll give you a nice plug. And as Mark said, you can use the chat box. If you want to compete for the best book prize, you use the Q&A. And if you want to see if you can do live mic, use the hand raising feature, but no guarantees that it's going to work.
And I just want to emphasize, I said this earlier, right before we officially started. Thank you, Al, for that introduction. But I want to emphasize that we invite you to interrupt the presentation with your questions. We will try and address as many questions as we get. And I'm giving away 3 copies of my to the people who have the 3 best questions. And those questions are going to be voted on tomorrow when they send out the follow-up email. The responses to that email, the crowd is actually going to pick the winner. So this won't be biased by Al or me or Mark. You all will get to decide who gets the book. So anyway, thank you all for attending. It was a huge honor for me to write this book. And it's a huge honor for me to be here with you today. And I really appreciate the work that Al and Mark are doing at Quizzify. And so I really thank you guys too for hosting me. Never Pay the First Bill. I wrote this book out of 15 years of investigative reporting on the healthcare industry. And I wrote it to equip and empower the employers of America and the employees. So the book is really focused on people who are in employer-sponsored health plans because they are getting the rawest of the raw deals on healthcare in America. These are just some stats that you all may be familiar with. We spend about twice as much per citizen in the United States on healthcare compared to other developed countries. And yet, we still have these massive deductibles where many working Americans are functionally uninsured, even though they have insurance. Or we have tens of millions of people who are still uninsured. So we're spending twice as much. We're not even covering our population. And those who have coverage still bear a massive cost. In fact, it's so bad that 1 in 6 Americans now has medical debt in collections. And a big part of the problem is that this price variation is so extreme for the same services in the same town, even if you have a different insurance plan in the same hospital. And this is the norm. This is the way the business is operating. So my mission, as I said, is to equip and inspire working Americans and employers to fight back against these, I believe they're injustices. I believe that it's not right to make a working American pay 2 to 5 times more than someone who's of Medicare age. Or I believe that when someone gets a flawed medical bill, lots of inaccuracies in medical bills, I don't think it's fair to demand that the patient pay it and send them to collections if they don't. So in the book, I really show some tactics that really were developed out of my investigative reporting, writing a lot of stories about these cases to show people how to fight back and win. And I think there's huge return on investment here. If each patient or each employee puts these principles into practice, they could save hundreds or even thousands of dollars with every single healthcare interaction. I mean, the amount of money that's possible to be saved is astronomical. And then, of course, if the employees are equipped and understand how to navigate the system, how to fight back, how to make sure they avoid things like price gouging or unnecessary care, well, then the health plan also saves exponentially more as they equip and educate their employees. So I think the return on investment is huge here.
Hey, Marshall, can I just
Yeah.
interject here? You said 2 to 5 times is what the typical employee / employer is paying versus Medicare.
Right.
Well, you know, you and I and Mark and a couple other folks, Marty, Makary, and a couple of people who had been billed, Therese Costa and James Hamilton, were on a call in this very forum in March,
That's right.
where an in-network hospital, whose name we are not releasing until they finally settle, they're going to, if we think they're going to fold, probably more on that later. An in-network hospital was charging 28 times the Medicare rate, plus another $1,700 for some doctor who didn't show up.
Incredible. So yeah, 2 to 5 times. I'm actually being conservative and I'm being friendly to the industry when I use the 2 to 5 times estimate, because you're right. There's not any upper limit on what can be charged. And so especially with out-of-network care, you do see some bills that are absolutely egregious. In fact, an example I'll talk about here is a young woman who I helped with her medical bill. Her United Healthcare negotiated insured price, the discounted price, was 22 times higher than the cash price. So as Al is saying, 2 to 5 times might be being a little too nice to the industry, because it could be way more than that.
So we have a couple of questions coming
Good.
in already. I don't know if you can read them, but I'll put on my, I'm 65, so I got to put on my reading glasses here. One question is, I am much more curious about the consumer's decision opportunities in the process of care. Do you provide counsel for, meaning in the book, for consumers on how to challenge medical decisions?
I do. So I have a chapter on how to avoid unnecessary care. I think one of the most important things people can do is make sure that they're not getting treatment they don't need. And so I think the number one most important question that I recommend people ask anytime a doctor or a nurse practitioner is recommending some type of discretionary care, not like, you're not going to the emergency room here. You're considering whether you should be put on a drug or get a CT or MRI or some type of procedure maybe they want to do on you. Ask this question: doctor, what happens if we wait? What's the worst thing that could happen to me if I don't undergo this procedure right now, or if I don't get put on this drug, or if I don't get this MRI or this scan? Because usually what they're doing is they're steering you toward treatment because they get paid on a fee-for-service basis when they do stuff. And so their natural inclination is to recommend a pathway that you should go down. And I think that you should always ask, let's reframe it by saying, what's the risk of not taking action? So I do go into that in the book. In fact, in the bullet points here, I talk about how to avoid unnecessary treatment, how to protect yourself from price gouging, how to identify errors in your medical bill. So these various, the book is broken down by these different chapters. Are there other questions here we should hit, Al?
Yeah, there are. But first, just FYI, I don't know if you can see this, anybody, but you can just write to Quizzify, and those questions that Marshall just described can be downloaded right into your Apple Wallet. This is my Apple Wallet. So see, I've got my credit cards and everything. So you have them right in front of you under doctor questions, scan questions, exactly what Marshall said. That doesn't mean you shouldn't buy his book. His book's got a lot of other stuff in it too.
Definitely.
But to your point, and then we have actually a bunch more coming in. If we don't get to your question right away, it's only because, in fact, that we're going to cover it a little bit later on. So, and this one is an example of one that gets covered later on, because it says, Marshall, are you hinting at all healthcare expenses, PCP visit, eye exam, PT, or limited to hospitals only? And I think you're going to cover that a little bit later when you talk about the New Jersey example.
Yeah, so the most study has been on hospital expenses, but all expenses are working Americans, employer-sponsored health plans are paying higher prices for outpatient and inpatient procedures, tests, visits. Everything in the employer-sponsored place is priced at a much higher level than it is for the Medicare population. So I'm talking about all different types of visits and care.
Yeah, and you're going to show some actual examples of rather egregiousness that a state health plan was able to clamp down on.
Yeah, so Bruce asked a great question here. As a self-funded employer, I don't see medical bills. My TPA does, so the third-party administrator handles those. How can I make sure they're on the alert for overcharges and inaccuracies? So I've done a lot of stories about healthcare fraud and just the incredible, egregious way the big insurance players, United, Aetna, Cigna, Humana, the way they just auto pay a lot of these claims. And I've talked to fraud investigators who work for each of these companies. They tell me that they see fraud all the time, but it's expensive and time consuming and full of litigation for them to actually intervene and hold these doctors or hospitals accountable. Sometimes it's flat out criminals, okay? Criminals have such easy access to our healthcare system. So what I recommend people do is ask your third-party administrator, what are you doing to protect my money? What are the levels at which the bills are screened or someone takes a second look at them? Because they'll set thresholds where anything over $5,000 they might take a look at. Anything under $5,000 gets auto adjudicated and just paid. So ask your third-party administrator what they're doing, and then find an independent advisor. If you don't get the answer you like, or it takes them a long time to answer a very simple question, find an advisor who will work on your behalf, who can help you find a third-party administrator who will actually look at those things for you and be transparent about how they do it. The other thing I recommend is there's these great third-party vendors. I've talked to several of them. I haven't obviously worked with them myself, but they analyze claims data for self-funded employers, and they will show you all the overpayments. They'll show you all the errors. They'll show you all the things that you should be contesting. And so if your plan doesn't have one of these vendors and you've never consulted one of these third-party vendors, I would highly recommend you do that. It might be eye-opening. You might find immediately things that you've been paying that you don't need to pay.
Yeah, and if I could just add something to that, I mean, I've seen a lot of these bills. I've worked with these vendors. 95% of them are from the national carriers. So if you have a choice between, I don't know, regional, statewide, blue, and a national carrier, it probably isn't a close question. If you dig in, you're gonna find that I'm going to say something nice about the blues. It's true for other concentrated health plans as well, that if they have this truly, a close relationship with folks in their community, you're much less likely to be have what Marshall described than if you're in a national health plan.
These are awesome questions, Al. Keith has a great question here. How does a member fight the argument that the price is what the employer agreed to through the PPO contracted rate? I love this question because it's getting at this, frankly, messed up situation we have where our employer-sponsored health plan signs up for a PPO network through, say, some insurance plan or through a self-funded TPA relationship. And then that insurance plan, the insurance company sets the rates with, say, a hospital or a doctor. And then me as the third party, as the consumer, well, I'm just expected to pay the rate that they have set. So let me go back to this example I told you about earlier about this woman I helped, young woman, 26 years old, who found out that her United Healthcare negotiated rate was 22 times higher than the cash price. In fact, it was the negotiated rate, this was for a level 3 emergency room visit, was $5,805. So her plan paid about $3,100, and then she was being told to pay $2,800 more. So again, this is the exact situation Keith is asking about. Well, if she just followed the rules as they were laid out for her, she would be on the hook for $2,800. My contention is that this is not fair, especially when you look, because of the hospital price transparency rule, we were able to pull from that hospital's website all of the rates as that hospital had negotiated with United, with Blue Cross Blue Shield, with Medicare. And so we could see, wait a minute, United's price for this exam was $5,800. That's the discounted price, remember. Blue Cross's price was $767. So the United price is what, 8 times more than the Blue Cross price? The Medicare price was $230 and the cash price was $256. So because she had United Healthcare and United had agreed on this high rate, she was being told to pay it. This is where some people might think this is a radical suggestion, but I don't think it is. I actually think it's common sense. I helped this young woman sue the hospital in small claims court for the $2,800 that they were pursuing her for. And her argument was, why should I be expected to pay $2,800 more than the $3,100 you got from my health plan just because I have United Healthcare? You're discriminating against me because of my insurance. So she made them an offer. She said, you need to at least waive my portion and I'll pay you nothing, or back the whole thing out, give United back their money. And then it was actually her employer's money because it was a self-funded plan, but give the money back and I'll do it as a cash pay patient. So she made this, what some people would say is an audacious proposal. It was actually quite a reasonable proposal.
So
she filed a case in small claims court. So what you do when you file a case in small claims court, and I have a chapter in the book on how to sue in small claims court. I show people how to do it. I've shown how other people have done it. And in this case, I helped this young woman do it. You flip the power balance when you file in small claims court, because our court system has set this up for consumers who are being exploited or taken advantage of to stand up to powerful institutions. And she got a call from the attorney from the hospital, and the attorney told her, it's not worth the hospital's money to pay me to defend this case. It was costing them hundreds of dollars an hour to defend the case. So the attorney made her an offer. He said, look, we'll settle this right now. We'll cut your cost in half. You pay us $1,350 or $1,400 and we're done. Again, she had called the billing department for months and they had ignored her. Okay. So the real reason she got leverage was because she filed the case. She said, I'm not going to do that. That's still not fair to me. They said, okay, let's do this. We will waive the bill entirely, your portion of it. You pay us nothing, but you have to sign a non-disclosure agreement where you can't talk about any of this. Now, I know this because I was helping her through this whole process. And all I can tell you about the end of the story is I found out that there was some type of a settlement come to between the two parties. And that was all that can now be said about it. So regardless of what you feel about NDAs, sometimes people do sign them when they settle things. And so, but I've also helped other people do this or told other people about small claims court. The book has lots of examples. So I just think that we shouldn't agree to things that we haven't agreed to up front. There's a principle called an open price contract, where if the price is not given to you up front, the open price contract principle would say that you're assuming it will be a fair price. And so when they violate that open price contract principle, then we're not required just to pay whatever they tell us we have to pay if the price isn't fair. So that's an answer to Keith's question.
So the argument against that, and we have a solution, and some of you know it. The argument against that is that you have actually signed a consent that had the pricing in it.
That's right. In fact, this is the Quizzify battlefield consent, which I also include in the book, especially in the emergency room, right, where you're not able to shop, which is where this young woman was. If she would have put in Quizzify's battlefield consent language, which Al, why don't you tell him what that says?
Yes, it says, in fact, actually, can we do a screen share? Because I just want to show, I'm just going to.
Yeah, let me stop sharing.
Yeah, okay. And then I will start the share. And this is, we didn't really practice this at home. So let me see, it is. Tell me if you're seeing a screen share now.
I see it.
Okay. So let me see if I have Quizzify up here. And we will go
Maybe
to
you can talk about James's case now too.
Yeah. So we did one of these cases in March. where we had the actual person there, James Hamilton, who was on talking about his experience in the ER, where he had spent, he had actually used language like what you're seeing right here, and he signed that language, and he has copies of it. I will read you the newest language. This is slightly different than what Marshall has in the book because of James's case. It says superseding other consents, and notice this is all, you can just download this and use it yourself. I consent to responsibility, including insurance, for up to 2 times Medicare following receipt of an itemized bill for appropriate treatment. Now, if you go down this line by line, the reason we have superseding other consents, this particular language, the form in Marshall's book has probably been used hundreds of times by now by Quizzify customers and friends. We had one situation that we know of where somebody used the language, but they also signed informed consent. So that's why we now have the superseding other consents. Now, to the point, Marshall, that you made about being a United Healthcare customer, you don't have to tell them what insurance company you have when you sign this. You will just submit it later, and that way they can't say, oh, we have a contract with the insurance company for 50 times this amount. I consent to responsibility, including insurance for up to 2 times Medicare, which is fair, because remember, were a hospital to take you to court, you have to have, and let's say they disagree with this. If they disagree with this, they still have to treat you. That's the key to the whole thing. If you have any kind of non-elective, whether it's a ER visit, an admission, transfer, delivery, they have to treat you, even if you don't come to agreement on price. Well, on the off chance, and we're hoping somebody does, but they haven't, one of these hospitals takes you to court because they treat you, but they don't agree on a price. And you say, Your Honor, I offered to pay twice the level that Medicare pays. They're not going to take that risk, because if the judge finds in the favor of the patient, their whole pricing scheme is out the window. And then the final 2 items, and Marshall, this is your thing, is always ask for an itemized bill. It took James months to get an itemized bill out of these people, and this would say he's not eligible. And those of you who are looking for data from hospitals, those of you who are employers, it will help if you only have itemized bills. That way, the question that somebody asked about how can you tell if you're being snookered, well, you'll have the bills. Somebody will have the bills for appropriate treatment, and appropriate is also an important word, because people get billed for things that are not appropriate, and now you don't have to pay for it if this is the language. So with that,
yeah,
Marshall,
so that language nicely lays the groundwork for a potential protection that you'll have if you need to defend yourself legally, or if you want to sue in small claims court down the road. And so I do think that's a very smart thing for people to apply. It's something I recommend in the book. I see Michael Brothers has a great question here. Does the book describe or list any providers that are fair and reasonable on a regular basis, or does this not exist? This absolutely exists. So when we talk about price variation, as an investigative journalist, I'm typically focused on the people who are price gouging, right? I'm exposing the bad apples, and I'm calling them out, and I'm naming them, and I'm holding them accountable. But on the other side of the spectrum, you have the people who play fair, and there would be too many of them for me to list them in the book, and it's very localized. But I think the key for employers working with their third-party administrators, or with some of these vendors who are identifying the value providers who are being fair, who are not cheating people, not exploiting people based on their sickness, identify those in your local community, and then steer your people toward them, incentivize your employees to go to them. And I think that the employers and the employees need to understand that they can work together to overcome these problems. So I believe, and I know Al believes, that it's going to take some educating of the employees to help them understand how this system works and why it's working against them. But I think we do need to reward those providers, those hospitals and doctors who are treating people fairly.
If I could just add to that, I mean, it's probably 2/3 to 90% are reasonably fair. One of the watchouts, Marshall, I'd be curious as your opinion on this, is if You know that a practice has been owned by a private equity company.
Yeah.
I mean, what do you think? I mean, that to me is a red flag. I don't know.
That's a red flag. I also think another red flag is I see someone asking about shopping for, Charles here asks about what are your recommendations for price shopping local healthcare systems for discretionary care? The federal government now requires hospitals to post their prices. Many hospitals are still not in compliance with that federal rule. If they're not in compliance and can't tell you their prices, I would consider that grounds for not going to them for services. So I think they should be able to share those prices with you, because I see Charles is saying he's having a hard time getting fair pricing from these folks. But you should be able to get that now. There's a lot of power in that local or in that rule. I think the key is just finding the people who will be fair.
You know, we have a lot of people competing for this these 3 free books. Why don't you get a few more items in, and then
Yeah,
we'll go
let
to
me
the rest
talk about
yeah.
this myth of rich health benefits. I really appreciated and enjoyed doing this story about the New Jersey health plan for teachers and educators. Covers about 165,000 people. And it was a plan that had a big flaw in it. And the thing is, this flaw in the plan was very known to the people administering the plan and even the brokers and advisors advising the plan. But the control of the plan design was held by a plan design committee made up of 3 state employees and 3 representatives of the teachers' unions. And so the teachers' unions on this panel did not want to give up their rich benefits. But here's the problem with these benefits. They had no limits on the out-of-network spending for acupuncture, chiropractor, and physical therapy. And so I did a records request. And again, this is something where the employee thinks, oh, I have great benefits. My health plan pays for it, right? Well, what happened is I did a records request and I got the data for how much this health plan was paying these 3 different types of providers. And it was astounding. Some acupuncturists and physical therapists were paid more than $600 per visit on average. More than 70 of them were paid more than $200,000 in a single year just from that one health plan. One of the acupuncturists brought in more than $1 million a year just for that health plan. And when you think about who's paying for these rich health benefits, well, at the same time, this plan was blowing through this money through no limits on out-of-network spending, teachers were striking because their healthcare costs were so high and because their wages were too low. And so a lot of employees don't understand the link between compensation and healthcare costs. And so in the book, one of the principal reasons I explain to employees that they need to fight back is because there's not some magic money tree that's funding their healthcare. It's the compensation that's funded by the employers. And when the compensation is disappearing because of high healthcare costs, there's less money left over to pay the employees. And employees need to understand that it's not like my employer pays it or my health plan covers it, so it doesn't matter. It matters a lot. And then, by the way, I am living in New Jersey. I'm a homeowner here. The New Jersey homeowners pay the highest, or at least some of the highest, property taxes in the nation. When I tell people in other states what I pay in property taxes, it blows their mind. And in this case, the thing is, the solution was right there at their fingertips because they had another state plan for police officers and other town officials. They put a cap on that out-of-network spending for acupuncture, chiropractic, and physical therapy. And so they estimated if they put the same fix in place to the teacher plan, they would save $130 million a year. I mean, I feel like that villain in the Austin Powers movie, $130 million, right? Like that is huge, huge money that they could save. Well, and I'm happy to say that after I did the story, it created enough pressure that the plan design committee relented and they changed the plan. They fixed the problem. They put caps on the spending And it didn't mean that the teachers were not able to go to acupuncturists or chiropractors or physical therapists. And I even checked in with them recently, just a few months ago. And I said, hey, I know you estimated that you would save $130 million a year. Did that actually happen? And they were like, yeah, when we made that change, that's the money that we saved. So that's just kind of a misunderstanding people have about the way their health benefits work.
So just to,
we're now at, go ahead, Al. I see your
oh, I was
hand
just going to say,
raised.
just
Very
just
polite,
to,
Al, to raise your hand.
yeah, I was just seeing if the feature worked actually.
It works.
Just before we get off that, I think kudos to you and kudos to the folks in New Jersey. I think actually the state and the union both breathed a sigh of relief that they were able to find a win-win. And I mean, they all wanted to do the right thing, and you just kind of pointed them the right way. Okay, so now it is time. And by the way, we have a zillion questions lined up. Also, a couple people have chatted and they said they've just been pre-ordering your book. This is like Home Shopping Network, where people order while you're talking.
Love it. You people are making me very happy. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
So the way this works is that Mark is going to put up a polling question, and you will pick A, B, C, or D here. And this will segue into the next section, which is, it was reported in the Atlantic that 99% of surgeons would not get which of the following types of surgery: spinal fusion, bariatric, droopy eyelid, I don't know how to pronounce it, or hysterectomy. And while you're doing that, and it takes a second for the poll to come in, Marshall, what is your estimate of the amount of waste in healthcare from people getting surgeries they shouldn't be getting and that kind of thing?
So let me just tell the story here, Al, of my friend of a friend, Jeff, who has now become my friend, who I was introduced to help find a surgeon. And Jeff told me I need a spinal surgery. So I helped Jeff find some good spinal surgeons in his area, but I did tell Jeff, hey man, you do just have to keep in mind that many spine surgeries are done that are unnecessary. And to answer your question, Al, they estimate that 25% or even up to a third of all healthcare spending is wasted. In fact, I spent a whole year in 2017 investigating our healthcare system's waste. I went on this quest to identify all the most outrageous and expensive types of waste I could find. And the wasted spending problem is one reason why I say in my book, we need to fight back. Like, if you knew that 25% or 33% of all healthcare spending is wasted, you would be empowered to push back and say, hey, you don't need to keep raising my prices every year. You all need to stop wasting money. Anyway, Jeff went to one surgeon. The first surgeon tells him, this is an emergency situation. If we don't operate on you right now, you could be paralyzed. Don't go golfing. Your golf swing could put you in a wheelchair. I mean, it was like real scare tactics. He got a second opinion. The other doctor also told him he should get operated on. He wasn't quite so sure about that. So he went to physical therapy for 6 visits. He kept doing some physical therapy exercises at home. He changed his diet. He changed his training regimen because he's into martial arts. So it was a little less aggressive. And you know what? The pain went away. And now he just shakes his head thinking about how much it would have cost him and his health plan and the risk he would have been under if he would have undergone that spinal surgery that was unnecessary.
Yeah, and I'd like to add a couple things. Well, first of all, let's see what the polling gives us here. And I'd like to add a couple things to that. Well, yes, so this is a very literate audience here. They do get that spinal fusion is probably the worst major surgery. If you look at your spending and you are a large enough employer, you will see that if you include both lumbar and cervical fusions, they are to combine the number 2 or 3 total expense in your organization. And it's not going down anytime soon because these things are moving outpatient, which means that, to use your example, Marshall, the doctor could have just said to the patient, oh yeah, we can take care of that. You'll only be in for a day, you'll be recovered. That's not the issue with spinal fusion. It's what happens in the long term. And to add a couple other things to that, just briefly, we have a saying at Quizzify, and we have this actually in a couple of questions. which is that if you have back pain, that 90% of back pain will go away on its own, but 90% of people think they're in the other 10%. So you just have to remember the chance they're 9 out of 10, you're not in the other 10%. We have a whole back pain quiz that you should have your employees take before they agree to this type of surgery. Marshall, back to you.
Yeah, so I see some questions here. Someone asks anonymously, I would love to know some vendor names that analyze the claims for employers. I can't endorse anyone because I haven't actually worked with these folks, but I have seen the work and talked to the folks at Claim Informatics. So that's one group. But maybe people could also pop in on the chat and mention some of these other vendors that do claims review, because I know there's a lot of them out there. It's just I've never, I'm not working with these folks, so it's hard for me to just say one. I see Michael Brothers asks about an assistant surgeon that signed up on his case, and then United paid him 4 times more as much as the lead surgeon. That's crazy. So I would say on that case, if you ended up bearing some of that cost through your coinsurance, those are your damages. You could sue in small claims court whoever the entity was that passed that bill on to you. So if it was the assistant surgeon that was billing out of network, or maybe the hospital billing on behalf of the assistant surgeon, you would name that party as the defendant, and you would, here you have a really easy example. They got paid 4 times more than the surgeon. So just use the surgeon's price as the fair price. 4 times that is unfair. Sue them for that difference and figure out what it cost you and sue them to get your money back. That's what I would recommend in that case. I can't answer Bruce Tapp's question about Medicare costs. That's not something I've dug into, so I'm sorry I can't answer that. Claire, when do you agree to a cash pay rate? It doesn't get counted against your deductible typically. That's correct. How do you address that? That's the problem with paying cash. So if you offer to pay cash, it's not going to go toward your insurance deductible. That's kind of just an equation that depends on your situation about whether that's the right thing for you to do. But I do have a chapter in the book about always asking for the cash price. I show lots of examples of the cash price being way less than the insurance negotiated price. So again, we have this idea, right? This myth that's been created by the insurance companies that they're the guardians of our dollars, that we can't get a good deal unless we belong to their special networks. This is the power that they hold on us to get us to pay them premiums and get us to enter into their system where they control things without really showing us how things work. When you step outside of that system, you find often that you can get a much better price without insurance. I'm not saying people shouldn't be insured. I'm saying that the insurance companies are not necessarily getting us the best deal. And by the way, anything I'm saying here, it doesn't always work. Like I had my own mom call me. I'm a lot like my mom. So she called me up one time and she goes, "Hey, I tried that cash price thing you recommended and it didn't work." I was like, "Well, Mom," I said, it's like, you should always ask, but it doesn't mean the cash price is going to be better than what you're paying. It's just that you should always check, So these are things that we can check, avenues we can try and go down, but it doesn't mean that it's always going to work out in our favor, right?
Yeah, and really, at my experience, and I think it's basically the same as you're describing, is that it's really these national carriers that try to have this massively large network, and as a result, essentially agree to whatever the provider wants. Blues that have 30 or 40% of the market in their state are generally able to get much better prices. Do you want to, sir? Because I'm looking at a question I'd love to answer here from Chrissy Gupton, who I think you met.
These are so many great questions here. Are there any specific ones that you want me to address, or should I just keep going through them?
Well, there's one I'd love to address because it just happened the other day, which is, are there any vendors or consulting firms that do any good? I know a great health plan design that works. So the consulting firm community is made up, not unlike the provider community, of the honest and the dishonest. And the new thing that they do, the dishonest ones do, the large ones, the small ones are generally much better at this, is they're now collecting from both sides. So for instance, if Mercer signs you up from Livongo, you don't realize that Livongo is also paying Mercer, even though you're paying Mercer. Now, one or the other side should pay. So for instance, if you've got Livongo through a health plan. Well, you know, the health plan is marking it up because, you know, they're like you go to the store, you know, a quart of milk costs, I don't know, $1, but the store's paying 70 cents. But if you yourself are paying a firm to consult for you, they should not also be collecting money from the other side. And this just happened with Aon and Accolade. Accolade, which is a vendor that does care coordination, paid Aon to say that they save money when they don't. Now, you don't take my word for it because I saw this. It was perfectly obvious that Accolade had paid Aon to say this. So I offered a bet to Aon. I said, I bet you're lying. I'll bet you $1 million you're lying. I've got a bunch of people behind me. I easily have raised that $1 million, and that's a standing bet. The Accolade, I could even show you on a slide. The Accolade actuary looked at my LinkedIn profile and ran away. I'm sorry, the Aon actuary did. So thank you for that question. I could go on and on.
We can go on and on. We're going to have to add a second hour here, Al, but Karen's got a great question. What if they give you that consent form in electronic form and you want to write in your battlefield consent? On this one, I recommend people ask for a printout. Ask for a printed consent form so that you can fill it in and you can alter it. Al,
yeah, and while you're talking, I will find an example of that. So keep going and I'll just tell you when I have the example.
Does the book address traditionally problematic billing practices that overlap access to care bottlenecks around things like dialysis, out-of-network anesthesiologist, or ambulatory services? Problematic billing practice that overlap. I'm not quite sure. I'm sorry, David, I don't quite understand your question, but you can email me. I'm easy to reach, folks, at marshallallen.com. And you can always reach out to me, or on LinkedIn. I'm really easy to reach on LinkedIn. Message me and I can follow up with that. What's the best way, David also asked, what's the best way to circumvent the protections networks enjoy that come with the PPO contractual language, often parroted by the TPAs, around having to accept contracted network rates? So I talk a lot in the book. My advice for employers is to get an advisor who will work on your behalf. So I don't have expertise on that depth of a question, but there are a lot of independent advisors. And when I say independent, I mean an advisor that you are paying for their services. Traditionally, the healthcare brokers are being funded by the insurance companies, by the PBMs, by the other vendors that participate in these employer-sponsored plans. And so often they don't even disclose these bonuses and commissions, although they're going to have to start disclosing them. So try and find someone at least who will disclose to you their funding, and ideally try and find one who will let you pay them a direct fee. That way they can give you that independent advice about the best third-party administrators, the best PBMs, and that kind of thing. That's certainly outside my area of expertise, getting that deep into the details.
Marshall, can I just interrupt?
Yeah.
Because I just found that slide. So
Great.
I'm going to share my screen again. So if you could unshare.
I will.
All right. And I'm going to, all right. So I'm sharing my screen and I'm going to blow this up now. Let me see, what do I do here to blow it up? Oh, here we go. Slideshow. So this particular individual, here, you can see it. He just typed in the language. I consent to appropriate treatment. So you can see the language written in here, and he got a copy of this language from the hospital. Okay, so he wrote it in. He had them printed out and write it in. That's what you need to do. Or alternatively, if you're an employer, and there are several employers who do this, all Quizzify customers, you have it put right on the insurance card. Okay, Marshall, back to you. I just wanted to do that.
So Will Wright asks, it feels as if the perceived value of employer-sponsored health benefits is declining. Are you seeing new employees losing interest in these benefits compared to purchasing elsewhere? I think part of the problem is the benefits that are often being offered have been scaled down so much to the point that people are functionally uninsured. You know, if the benefits are skimpy or the deductibles are so high that the employee is paying so many of the first dollars anyway, it might not be the best value for employees. Let me go back and share my screen here again. and continue here with the presentation. So Al had asked this question: in percent, how much healthcare spending is wasted on overuse?
Okay, so use the chat box. Now you have been using the Q&A. Use the chat box, and we will take the first close answer that comes in. Yeah, actually, we gave away the answer already, so
Kind of
everybody's
gave
pretty
away
close.
the answer on that.
Yeah,
one
we
a
gave
little
away
bit.
the answer. Okay, so Marshall, yeah, it's 25
It's about
to 30%.
25% are the estimates.
So here is this is a rather old slide, but it tells a very interesting story because the ratios haven't changed. It shows the comparison of unnecessary care, which is what Marshall is talking about, Quizify talks about, to other wasteful spending. So you can see this is what employers typically go after. They have care coordination vendors like Accolade that doesn't save any money. And they have wellness vendors going after these little avoidable care and uncoordinated care amounts with no success, I might add. According to Health Affairs, wellness is a complete waste of money. Whereas if you go to the next, if you click,
Yep.
if you click, not me, yeah. It's a perfectly obvious opportunity to teach employees that just because it's healthcare doesn't mean it's good for you. And that's what Quizify does. So back to you, Marshall.
So another thing, topic, an area of employee education is just the price gouging, the price variation, which I've hinted at before. But an example is this guy, Kevin Vincent, who lives in Amarillo, Texas. He needed 2 MRIs before he underwent a back procedure. He was on a high deductible plan, so he had to pay the first $10,000. So that's a high deductible. And he got referred by his nurse practitioner or doctor to an MRI facility that was attached to his hospital. And if you've looked at any of the research on this, hospital-based MRI centers and imaging centers are way more expensive than independent ones. And so he was quoted a price of $11,000 for these 2 MRIs if he went through his insurance, or he did a good thing. He asked for the cash price and they gave him a $2,000 discount. So they said it would be $9,000 for these 2 imaging tests. Well, he had a friend who worked in the industry. His friend referred him to Green Imaging. Greenimaging.net is the website. And Green Imaging does direct pay contracting with independent imaging centers. So he was able to send his orders for the MRIs to Green Imaging. They routed him to an independent imaging center that was about a mile from the hospital-based imaging center, right there in Amarillo. He got both of those images done for $950. That included the reading of the images and copies of them. So he saved just like that, boom, $8,000 he saved on these 2 images, which is just incredible. And this kind of price variation, I mean, this is an extreme example, right? Because it was so easy for him to do and he saved so much money. But this type of price variation is throughout our system. And the hospitals and other medical providers, pharmacy benefit managers, pharmaceutical companies, they've all profited on our ignorance, frankly. We just don't expect that things are going to be priced that differently. We haven't been as engaged as we should be. We've been too trusting of the system, but this kind of savings is available throughout our healthcare system. This is the young woman I talked to you about earlier, Gabby. In the book, I talk about really how to contest unfair bills and how to identify if you're being overpriced or overcharged, or if your bill is inaccurate. You need to get an itemized bill. You need to look up the billing codes. So you can go to fairhealthconsumer.org, check out that website if you haven't seen it, and you can get pricing estimates for your community. You can also look at hospital websites, as I've said. You can get your medical records. It's every patient's right to have a copy of their medical records under the law. You can look up the fair prices and challenge the inaccuracies or price gouging. And we mentioned to you the consent language. This is the battlefield consent that Al and I talked about earlier. And here's where you can write it in yourself. And speaking of errors in medical bills, another quiz question. What percentage of bills from hospitals contain errors?
And hit the chat box. And while you're doing that, Marshall, you've probably sold about 15 books just in the last 5 minutes.
That's wonderful. And I want to emphasize bulk discounts are excellent and they are available. Does this sound like a commercial around here? Does it sound like I'm an author trying to hawk a book? Well, I am. I'm not ashamed. The bulk discounts are great for employers or for advisors who want to buy them and give them away. But my goal, Al, is I want to equip every employee in America to understand, and employer. There's 8 chapters here for employees. There's 3 for employers. I want everybody to be wised up to this situation and to understand that we've been taken advantage of, but we're not helpless. We're not just victims. There is something we can do about this. Do we have answers on?
Yeah, we have nobody is even, number one, nobody's even close, but number two, just one thing, please help Marshall get this on the bestseller list, because that's the only way that it's going to get visibility into people who can actually do something about it, as opposed to individuals. It helped with Marty Makary's book. A lot of hospitals were shamed into no longer suing their patients, and it'll help a lot with this book too. So what percentage is the answer? We didn't have anybody even close here. 90%, but Marshall, to your point that we've made earlier, is that essentially every study done by a company in any industry will always show that whatever company, whatever industry is being studied is always this dramatic thing. So 90 is probably an overstatement, but whatever it is a very high number.
Yeah, I've looked into this a lot, Al, and the studies that have been done, including this one, have been done by the companies that do the review of medical bills. So the sample size is skewed in that way. But I can tell you that anybody who looks at medical bills, I've talked to lots of patient advocates, they often find errors. They would tell you that most of them contain either an overcharge or a charge for something that should not have occurred. And as we talked about earlier, your big insurance companies are just auto adjudicating this stuff. They're not catching this kind of stuff. For them, it's nickels and dimes off of hundreds of billions of dollars that they're bringing in revenue. It's not worth their time to find these things, but it's worth our time because it's our money as employees and employers. Let's see here. If there are other questions you want me to hit, Al, let me know. I mentioned the hospital price transparency final rule. This is a game changer. We just have to make sure that they comply with it, and we need to insist on getting fair prices.
Marshall, answer whatever other questions you want. We're running a little short and there are far too many questions to answer. So
okay, let's see here.
You know, I'd like to clarify that we did actually get some right answers about the errors in the hospital billing errors. There was an answer from Ben here. It came in right away. He was at 80%. We had some other guesses at Keith McNeil at 80%, Michael Brothers at 80%. So we did have some answers that were reasonably close.
Yeah,
Nice.
I think I had 2 different chat boxes open. So this is totally my being 65 years old.
Those are good answers. I think that the truth is no one knows for sure, but it's high. And so I think all those answers would be accurate. This is a family that goes to my church, Josh and Jennifer. They were having a dispute with their dentist where he overcharged their credit card by $300 because he didn't run a fee through their insurance plan. And they dealt with this guy for years, calling this billing person, trying to get him to get their money back. I told Josh, hey man, you can sue in small claims court for a very small amount of money. And Josh sued the guy in small claims court. He immediately, within a few days, got a call from the attorney for this dentist, and they wrote him a check. So small claims court, again, it just changes the leverage for the consumer. Okay, what's the average filing fee for small claims court? Let's go through this one fast.
All right, yeah, and please use the chat box and not the Q&A. Okay, yeah, whoa, we've got quite a range here. Oh my goodness, the answers are pouring in. There are a few that are close, but Marshall, why don't you take it from here?
Well, the average according to this study is $40, and I have found that that's about right. This looks a little dated on the total limits because some of the limits are actually even higher. Like in Texas, the limit for small claims court is anything under $20,000. In Tennessee, it's $25,000. Here in New Jersey, where I live, anything up to $15,000 can be handled in what they call the special civil branch of New Jersey court, which doesn't need an attorney. So the limits are actually quite high And the bar to entry is quite low. You don't need to be an attorney, and you don't need to pay a lot of money to file your case. So I feel how like we're in Groundhog Day here, right? In fact, when I was writing this book, I've read all the healthcare books that have come out. I edited Marty Makary's latest book. So I'm very engaged in this space. And it's like Groundhog Day, you know, that movie with Bill Murray where he wakes up every morning and does the same thing. This has been going on now for decades. Employers are funding these costs, employees' total compensation and out-of-pocket costs increase, their wages are suppressed, our money's being wasted. And this has led me, the book has led me to push for a real change. And so I've also launched a health literacy side business now. I'm calling Allen Health Academy. And this is to create a series of health literacy videos. They're based on the same content in the book. So it's really just the book in video form. 3 to 5 minute videos, very engaging. And I actually had a health advisor and benefits advisor ask me to do this because he just said, look, I know your book is great, but I know that my employees in my plans are not going to read your book, but they will watch videos. So people can complete the video series, they get Never Pay certified, and that way they're equipped and empowered with just the general knowledge that they need to win these battles. And again, I think the return on investment is huge for this or for something like Quizzify. Anything we can do to educate the employee so that they understand how the system works. Think about the savings when they avoid an unnecessary procedure. I mean, or even just knowing the right questions to ask their doctors. It's a huge savings for them. They don't suffer the potential complications with these procedures, and it's a massive savings for the health plan. So if you're interested in that, go to marshallallen.com. You can sign up for my newsletter, and I'll definitely be announcing more about it. Our goal is to get those videos launched in July. So that's the plan right now. And the goal here is to change consumers from feeling paralyzed to being engaged and alert, and make them informed instead of ignorant, and make them feel empowered instead of feeling bullied. And that's my goal with the book for employers and for employees. And that's also the goal with the curriculum. And Al, I know that's what you're trying to do with Quizzify as well.
Yes, it's we're totally in sync here. If I hadn't thought we were, I wouldn't have invited you on, but we both identified the same issues and have a left shoe and a right shoe way of addressing them. So we try to end right on time, and there are a few questions that we did not get to, but every question that got asked will be answered. If you put a question in the chat box, please put it into the Q&A, because the chat box goes away, the Q&A stays. So Marshall, thank you very much for being with us. We had, as you can see, both a large and an engaged audience today. You sold a ton of books. I can tell a lot of people asking, where do I order? How can I order? You know, Amazon, obviously, but they're bulk orders. We'll leave that to Marshall to answer in the follow-up in a couple of days. And remember, in the follow-up, you're also going to be able to vote for the best questions, and the 3 winners will receive a free book.
Thank you, everyone. This has been a real honor for me, and I love the questions. This was a super engaged audience, so it was really fun for us. And again, reach out to me on LinkedIn. You can email me, reach me through my website.
We'll send all that information. We'll send all that information out. You don't have to write it down.
All right.
Everyone's going to get the recording and the slides. Okay, great. Well, thanks very much, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.